This is the Evansville Wartime Museum. We are renting at zero cost from the VFW here. So I want you to thank the VFW people here. They've been very kind to us. We got a couple things to do first. We're going to do Larry. Larry is probably one of the best singers in the city. And he's going to lead us at this point. Larry.
First, let's join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in singing the national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Okay, I've got about 8 announcements before we talk about our main speaker and what you really came for. First thing is we have some extra lunches, and anybody didn't get a lunch, you're more than welcome to get a lunch. If you want a second lunch, you can have a second lunch. These have steaks in them, so if you want a steak, I think you will hear from the news. Mike Tiemann and Donna Bone right here will probably make an announcement. Also, Meredith Marshall, that the Evansville Wartime Museum will open August 3rd, 2024. We have a temporary roof on and things are set up. We'll move the planes in, and it will be close to 97% of what we've had before. A lot of new additions have been made. There's a new exhibit coming out about each month. We are, I know you go to church a lot and you got fundraisers there, but we are going to have a thing called Big Ass Fan. Now, our plane was called Big Ass Bird for 20 years. Now we're going to have a Big Ass Fan. The Big Ass Fan is about 20 feet diameter, and it's going to keep the ambient temperature right. It's going to keep the ambient temperature correct at the museum. A little bit better for you. So we have $34,000 given by an anonymous donor, and we need to match that. So whatever you donate today, we will use these funds to match that. That is usually goes for education, but we're going to match it for the fan until we get the fan match. If you have any other change in your back pocket or you want a write-off, you're more than welcome to send it to the museum and say, for Big Ass Fan. The Big Ass Fan is also, we're going to paint the top of the museum because we're getting a new roof and we've got to match the roof. So we're painting the north and south walls and also the roof that'll match the color. I would like it quiet over at the lunch section, please. I know they want the steak, but let it go. Okay. Where is Mrs. Miles? Stand up front and center, please. This young lady has a degree, a master's degree in archiving. She's our archivist, been with us more than 2 years. And this young lady, if you have items in your garage, in your attic, or somewhere, you bring them in, and your nieces and nephews are going to throw it all out and give it to Goodwill or St. Vincent de Paul. We want it. We will selectively take what you have as opposed to going to the garbage. So that young lady, get out in front here, please. Okay, this pretty lady's, her name's McKay Miles, and her husband works for Channel 14, Rob, okay? So this is the lady you meet, and Meredith is at front desk, so she will take the items from you. And we have 13,000 now. We put them on Past Perfect on the internet. You get to our website and you can view everything. You just got to be computer savvy. I know you are. Okay. Just so you know, we have an elevator there. Any of you can get up to the second floor. It'll hold 500 pounds, a wheelchair plus a person in the wheelchair and behind the wheelchair. So that's available for our library upstairs and our archiving. So it will be open to the public that way in the near future. Second thing is we have a new archive room. It's temperature controlled. It meets all the standards of libraries and archiving facilities in the United States. Right temperature, right humidity, and right sunlight. And that was given $50,000 from Indiana Arts Commission, was a grant submitted by us. We only had to take $18,000 to pay for the whole thing. It's $68,000. And John, whatever over there, helped organize it. John, there he is back there. And this guy's been stressed. His name is John Gross. His brother talked here not too long ago, but John Gross, because we've had things in disarray for 4 months, he's been the manager of all that, and he's in charge of our maintenance, and so he needs a hat off, okay? He needs a vacation. Now, 2 weeks from now, the August 1st, if that's 2 weeks from now, August 1st, is a man named David Carnes. And so you sign up with my wife, or that's a pretty lady over there. There's two pretty ladies, but she's the other pretty lady. That lady, you call her or you sign up today, then she's going to talk to you as much. And then she'll recall you a day or two before because she's, perfectionist. Anyway, David Carnes, USMC Semper Fi. That's okay. He was in Connecticut when 9/11 happened. And everybody was running out of New York. He ran back into New York, and he went to the first tower, and it was all rumbles, and everybody gave up on it, but he found a few movements in the ground there, and he saved 2 people that were partially buried. So he's going to talk about that whole day, and he's talked about a year ago at Faithway Baptist Church, but he's on the way here August 1st, so you sign up for that one. Love to have you. Now, this is our prime speaker today. This is Dr. William Carey. And I'm going to just say he has been involved with the museum for the last 2. His bride is Karen. She's in the front row, and she's the better half. But anyway, I've known him for the last several years. He's taking care of my eyes, my wife's eyes, and everybody knows eyes, but he's a good eye doctor. We've got Dr. Miles here, is another good eye doctor. But anyway, Dr. Carey has a uniform on, and he's been in uniform for 36 years as either reserve or active duty. He's in my similar age bracket. We went through the same scholarship. I went to Navy. That's a little bit better than the Army, but he went to Army. We'll let him have that. But his son-in-law is Jamie Prescott. He's a videographer. He's only done about probably 1,500 videos. He does Mrs. Childs. What's that lady's name? Julia Childs. He does all these food shows, but he's done one on Bill. You'll see part of it on Afghanistan. He's also done it on a guy named Joe from New York, a relative. We flew out there, talked to Joe. He's 99 right now. He was on the soil 36 days in Iwo Jima. You have Gene Logle's brother, Leonard Logle, was killed there. Mr. Norton is an attorney here. He was there and got shot, and he went back to the island, and he was a Marine. It was the toughest thing for all Marines in Iwo Jima, and we have that on video. We will have it, our new exhibit coming soon on Afghanistan and Iwo Jima. And his son-in-law, his wife, they're primary movers in those 2 exhibits. Now, Bill has agreed to take off work today to talk to us. He's been taking care of your eyes for 30 years in Evansville or more, and I can't thank him enough. I can't thank him and his wife enough of everything they've done for the museum and everything they've done for the vision of Evansville. So take it away, Bill. Take it away.
Testing. Testing. Can you hear me back there? Okay. You got that, Brian? I think so. Okay. Well, thank you very much for allowing me to come and share some issues with you. Dr. Browning, I appreciate that very nice introduction. I do have to make a couple of corrections. 39 years, not 36. And when we used to have Navy and Marine Corps people come to our facilities, if we trained them and then we had to break for lunch, when they came back, we had to retrain them. So. Speak up, Bill, we can't hear you. Get closer to your mouth. I'm sorry you didn't hear that one. Okay, well, I want to apologize ahead of time because of the last hour and a half has been kind of fun. A lot of audio-visual issues that had to be taken care of. So hopefully we've got the bugs worked out and we'll be able to continue through to the end. As I look out and as I interface with some folks, I see some longtime friends. And as I look further, I see some newer friends. And hopefully by the end of the presentation, there'll be a whole bunch of brand new friends. So what we're going to do is go through my experiences leading up to and during and afterwards in Afghanistan. It's difficult for me to talk about this because, to be honest about it, the last time I actually gave a full presentation about my experiences in Afghanistan was 19 years ago. And the reason that there's been a big gap ever since is that first one didn't go very well. And I didn't realize at the time.
There's a high frequency pitch. Either this is bothering, and you're gonna have to use this other microphone. Give me a hand.
That's recording for 14 news.
Okay.
So just pull it off.
Still high pitched. I gotta get rid of the high pitch. I can't, it's squeaking. So give me a hand microphone.
It says one close to the show.
Give me a hand microphone. Get rid of this thing. Turn this one on. Testing.
Okay, is that better? I don't hear that. Okay, is that better? Okay, what was I saying about glitches on the equipment? Okay, so anyhow, that presentation 19 years ago didn't go that well. What I didn't realize at the time was that when you're in the midst of doing all the things we were doing, you kind of focus on the job at hand. You don't really recognize how internalized things become and how complex the emotions and the feelings are. And then when I did the presentation, that all came out, and I got a bit more emotional than I expected. So I kind of just don't talk about it much and internalize it all this time. However, recently, as Mark related, I've had an opportunity to talk to some folks that have done the same thing. They didn't talk about it for most of their life either. Specifically, I'm talking about my father and my Uncle Joe. And my father passed away before he could relate very much to me, but there's a few things I'll share as we go along here. But my Uncle Joe seemed, even though I spent decades in and about with him, didn't really know, except from a few comments through the family, what his experience in World War II was. And so we decided, when I mentioned to Mark that I had this relative that had this Iwo Jima experience, he decided that, well, let's go gather our stuff and go there and interview him. So we did, and I'll show you that here in a little bit. The problem with trying to relate my experience, or anybody's experience, is that there's sort of a tendency for folks that have been through something like that to kind of say, well, it's so intense and personal, but what we come to grips with is the fact that we kind of feel like those that know, and those that don't know will never know. There aren't words to put these feelings and these emotions into to kind of convey this. So I'm going to make my best attempt at it, and we're going to augment that with some videos and some real life encounters that hopefully by the end of this time together, you'll have a better understanding of it, and I will have gotten over my 19 years worth of not talking about it. I began my military affiliation back in 1971, 1968 with RTC, and that lasted through 1971. Now, those of you that have a little seasoning on you know that that was a tumultuous time in the U.S. The 1968 Democratic Convention was a real challenge, lots of riots and things, and the country was divided. And I think we know a little bit about how that is these days, but back then it was pretty severe. Now, I'm going to relate a little bit of the story, and the story starts with a friend of mine from high school that I was buddies with him, but one of the last times we were together, we were at my future wife's living room, and we were getting ready to double date for my high school prom. And by the way, you're going to need to let me cut me some slack on moving back and forth between these different things. I have 8 resources I'm going to go to, and it's not that easy to make this all happen. Okay. This is important enough that I'm going to recycle this because it's not opening up, but it will when I do this.
Marky's booty.
He practiced this 3 weeks ago at our office, and everything worked perfectly, and we had everything set up and went through everything. And then we get here, and we had to move systems, because the other system didn't work. Cole was at the dentist, and he's our audio-visual person, so we've had substitutes. I am sorry.
The face I want you to look at is right there. That's my buddy, Jeff Miller. The next time I saw Jeff Miller, was a little while later at Kent State, and when the Ohio National Guard opened fire on the students, that's Jeff Miller on the ground. He was one of the casualties at Kent State. As you might imagine, that didn't make a lot of love between the military and the rest of the community. So it was difficult at that time for me to say, should I stay in ROTC or not? Well, because of my father, my uncle, and that kind of heritage, I decided that maybe I could change things a little bit better from the inside out. So I did. So one of the things that ROTC did for me, it gave me a concept on how to teach people. And so the long and the short of it is, they had a very simple system, and it had 3 parts. The first part was, tell them what you're going to tell them. The second part was, tell them. And the third part was, tell them what you told them. So that's kind of what we're going to do here. We're going to do a lot of stuff from a lot of different directions. Before we start, the beginning, most people are curious, what's it really like in a combat medical environment? Well, it turns out there really is no good answer. And that's because in everything military, all plans become obsolete immediately upon the first enemy encounter. And the next thing is, the best you can hope for is a little bit of organized chaos. So that's kind of what you're going to be seeing when we go into the details here. Now, there's a concept that's going to come up, and it's called Groundhog Day. Is anybody here, are they familiar with the movie with Bill Murray called Groundhog Day? Kind of an interesting movie. The premise of it is that each day when Bill Murray wakes up, he was sent to a town called Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. And that's a town most people haven't heard of, except that's where the groundhog lives that they film each year for Groundhog Day. So he went to this mundane, routine kind of assignment for his TV station, and he went through the motions, and then the next day, when the alarm rang, he found himself in a time warp, and he replayed the day before. And that kept going on day after day after day in an endless loop. So keep that in mind as we get to the references to Groundhog Day later. When I initially put this presentation together, I tried to be very detailed and structured and kind of sanitize it. Not so graphic, not so in-your-face kind of stuff. Then I realized at the end of the day, that didn't give anybody a real appreciation of what happened. So I later on decided to be more flexible and fluid and more random. So if things look like they're coming at you from a bunch of different directions, that's because that's the way it is. And I think you get a better feel for the experience by doing it that way. On your table, you have a list of topics. Now, what are they? Well, it turns out I have 10 pounds of stuff to put in a 5-pound sack. So the bottom line is, we're not going to finish getting over all this stuff on time. So I'm going to do the best I can to be reasonably on time, but anything that goes over, I'm going to stay as long as anybody sees anything on that paper that they want to pursue, either after hours or with me personally, or if you invite me back sometime. prior to the deployment, somebody might ask, well, why did we even go to Afghanistan? Turns out that it was pretty well ascertained that the Taliban, the ruling structure in Afghanistan, was pretty much responsible for the terrorist attack on 9/11. And so we kind of went over there mostly to diminish the Taliban's influence so that they would be less of a terror threat worldwide. So that's kind of what got us over there. So with that in mind, I'm going to kind of show you a video. This video, it was created by one of the nurses at the 325th Combat Support Hospital that was there. And she was there a little while before I got there, and she was there all the time until I left. So some of these things are before I got there, and some of them are after I got there. In fact, I'm in some of the pictures. Also, on another level, I had an association with the 9/11 issue because my family grew up right near there. And as a matter of fact, my father was a 32-year veteran of the Nassau County, New York Police Force, right next to New York City, and my brother was a 30-year veteran. In addition, I have two nephews, one of whom had a wedding reception on the top floor of the World Trade Center, and the other nephew worked in the financial district right near the World Trade Center, and as the buildings were collapsing, he was literally in the street outrunning all the stuff coming down. So, with that in mind, I'll see if the powers that be are happy with us on this video. All of these things on the video are real, and they all took place in this place that I was stationed or immediately around it. Should be sound.
I hear it buzzing, but I've got it on.
Okay, well. Okay, the good news is the sound was just music background. Okay, so what you're seeing here, what you're seeing here is just the World Trade Center issues. And we'll go through some of that a little quicker. Oh, there we go. So the last days of the Taliban is the issue here. Now these are actual scenes from the Combat Support Hospital area. Okay, now I want to do a little bit of geography. So that's Afghanistan. You can see it's surrounded by Iran, Pakistan, and then the other stands, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, it's hard to say, and the other one that's important is Kyrgyzstan. And if you notice, China is right there too. In fact, it does border on Afghanistan just a little bit. Now, the area that's the capital is Kabul, and that's important because one of the vignettes talks about travel between Kabul and Bagram. Bagram is the airfield and the hospital area. That's a little bit of a bus ride, not much. And this area right here is where Osama bin Laden was ultimately found and captured, and the staging area for those missions was Bagram. Now, right here, this is an overview of Bagram Airfield. That's one of the runways. There's a few more up off the screen, and there's some built-up areas here having to do with the flight line. But right here is Camp Lacey, which is pretty much everything besides the airfield. And right in this area is the hospital. Now, there are some areas which we'll see later that are kind of walled off right here. Those are areas where leftover bad things from the Russian occupation, mines and other things, are kind of walled off. This is another couple of views of the hospital, the front door of the hospital. One of the walled off areas. Now, there's a lot of scenes of the people and the area, and you can see that the burqas that they're wearing here, that was prevalent when the nurse first got here. By the time I left, burqas were hardly worn anymore. And that's because the influence of the Taliban was diminished. So a lot of scenes of the people and the kids. We'll go forward here a little bit. One thing that's important here is, it's going to come up later, is that the mountains. There's very high mountains surrounding that whole area of Bagram. This is a picture of a school that we opened after we got rid of the Taliban from the community. Now, one thing to notice is that every seat is filled, but they're all boys. By the time I left, 30% of them were girls. Okay, now I'm going to transition into scenes from around the actual hospital. So this is what we do there. So all these are scenes from right there at the hospital. Now, 24/7, planes were taking off. This is an extremely busy airfield. So this is patients being evacuated from the helicopters. Upgraded from those wheeled carts to ambulances in the next year. A blown up Humvee. Another one. Some of the typical wounds we see. This is the nurse that did the video. kind of skipped over something that I wanted to show you earlier when I was talking about my Uncle Joe, and that he was reluctant to talk about his experiences in Iwo Jima. Well, we did that site visit and interviewed him, and I'm just going to show you a small portion of that. Can they hear that?
They couldn't take it or something. You gotta understand, I was an 18-year-old kid.
Put the mic on. Put your mic down, your speaker.
Fourth night, we went up to the front line. 34 days and 34 nights I was on the front line. I got hit 3 times. One time I got hit in the thigh. The second time I got hit in the shoulder. The third time I got, you look here, the little mark here, I got a piece of shrapnel right in there. Man, that burned like anything. When you see somebody next to you get shot in the head and he jumps all around.
Okay, so there's a extended set of videos.
Microphone to the mouth.
Thanks. There's an extended set of videos on that will be in the museum at some point.
Carey, retired full colonel from the United States Army Medical Corps. I was born in Huntington, Long Island, and moved fairly soon thereafter to Plainview, Long Island, which is a small town in the eastern part of the county adjacent to New York City. My father was a Marine during World War II. My mother was a Rosie the Riveter type person. She worked for Republic Aviation. Well, she didn't rivet anything. She worked in the electronics section of aircraft building. I'm one of 4 siblings. I have an older sister who's a nurse, registered nurse. I have a younger sister who's in the insurance industry, and my brother is a retired police lieutenant. I've been married for 53 years to my high school sweetheart. We met and dated for 5 years, then married. We have 3 children. We have 5 grandchildren, and we recently added a great-grandchild. My primary focus in medicine is now ophthalmology, but I got there in a relatively convoluted way. Throughout medical school, I kind of thought that I was headed for family medicine, but the more exposure I got to other kinds of medical practices, I began to enjoy a lot of other things. I particularly enjoyed delivering babies, and the satisfaction of being able to bring a life into the world was unmatched in any other experience I had in medicine. So I really thought I was going to OBGYN. Took a lot of electives in OBGYN and was really prepping to go that route. Then I got exposed to ophthalmology, and suddenly I found the same kind of fulfillment in being able to bring people's eyesight back as I did in delivering babies. And I think the thing that also intrigued me was that sense of precision, I think, appealed to my former background as an accountant, where everything had to balance and be just right. So together, I think ophthalmology seemed like a much better fit. And not only that, giving people sight back gave me the same kind of fulfillment as delivering babies. The only 2 places in medicine where I've if I felt that way. So on balance, changing to ophthalmology was probably the single most important thing that I've done in terms of medical decisions. We opened a practice in Evansville, Indiana in 1988, and the difference that we made was that we intentionally tried to make this a friendly and collegial practice where we would make patients be primary in our care, and we would spend extra time and effort with them, letting them know that we were particularly interested in them and not just their medical situation. And the same courtesies were extended to the medical community. I think that that bond that we created between patients and doctors and other medical providers was instrumental in making us successful.
I'm going to show you a quick run through on how Camp Lacey looked a few years ago and then when I got there. That'll give you kind of an overview of what it's like, and then we'll get into some of the real substance here in a minute. Let's see. Dr. Harkey, you'll hear his name in the next little segment, was a radiologist that was there back in Task Force 44 Med in 2002, and again with us, Task Force 325 Med in 2005. So I'm not going to try to mess with the size of this. We're just going to breeze through it. That's the main road through Camp Lacey back in 2002. That's how it got improved 3 years later. That's the front door in 2002. That's the improved version. That's the old entryway to the emergency room at the hospital. And this is an interesting fellow. This was the first patient back in 2002. And you can see that he's having a craniotomy, and he had some actual issues where we actually did some neurosurgery on him. Now, here's some interesting statistics. There's about 250 people in the hospital, and of those, about 100 of them are nurses or primary care doctors and providers. And of that 250 people, about a third of them are females. That's the old area where we lived, interconnected tents. This is where it improved. That's the old front door to the emergency room. That's the new front door. That's the improved transportation. That's the inside. This is the old living quarters where it's just a bunch of tents put together. One of the hazards is that you got rocket attack from time to time. That's the newer version. That was the old sanitation porta potties. At least they were nearby the living area. That got upgraded to this fancy thing, which was great because it was a very well done heat generating thing where you could literally take a steam bath. The problem is, if you look at the bottom by the stairs there, a bunch of rocks, you were 50 yards at least from your living quarters, and what doesn't show on this is the fact that after you got good soaking wet and tried to dry off, then you had to go back to your living quarters, and it was averaging 25 degrees below zero. So that was challenging. The old place of eating right outside the tents got upgraded to plywood corridors. and we took over an old Russian hangar and converted it to an eating facility, which, as you can see, is pretty nice. That's one of the Russian buildings. We confiscated that and used it as our dust-off headquarters. Some of the administrative areas. Now, that's Dr. Harkey. Now, the good news about him is when he was there in 2002, he upgraded all of the radiology facility so that when he came back in 2005, it was still as good as it was then. Not many places had a CT scanner in a combat support hospital, but we did. And these are the operating rooms back then. And these are similar to the kinds of things that we would see all the time, the types of wounds. And amputations were a big thing that we did because of the blast injuries. And that's the surgical ward area. And you might recognize that guy sitting down in the middle there. That's one of the few times you get to sit down. That's the operating room in 2005. Some of the kinds of cases we did later. This is a burn case, and we did lots and lots and lots of burns, and including skin grafts for the burns. Burn patient on the left. Another one. Now, you might not appreciate this, but right there is a worm. That's a parasite that we took out of somebody. This is a case we'll come back to later. This is a little girl. I think she's 3.5 or 4. She had 80% burns, and we skin grafted her and did all kinds of stuff. And there's a pretty happy ending to this. Dental, the new dental. Inside the new dental, sick call, new sick call, laboratory services then, laboratory services now, and pharmacy then and now, and gynecology services in 2005. We don't have a 2002 version because there wasn't one. Oral surgery, ophthalmology services, you might recognize that guy. And there's that patient that was the first patient that had the craniotomy. He got sent home. He did well, but then we lost track of him. This is the group of people that went with me on the trip to Afghanistan.
Traveled with me from the reserve units in Missouri. We had a dental surgeon, we had a general surgeon, we had an ophthalmologist, myself, and we had a radiologist, and we had 4 or 5 nurses. We were replacing the counterparts from the active duty units that were being relieved, but other units from other places were replacing the other components that were there. When everybody was all there together, we actually represented a very good cross-section of the medical specialties. The demands of the medical situations often required people to work outside their normal specialty. And the beauty of the complement of folks we had with us was everybody's willingness to work outside their specialty, to do what they could wherever they felt comfortable. And the long and the short of it was we had lots of people doing lots of things outside their normal activities. And
just to amplify that a little bit, I did a lot of things that weren't I related. I was able to do that because going back to ROTC and being in the military and being stationed where I was, I had the opportunity one time to be stationed at a place in Alabama. And long story short, I went to flight surgeon school there, and I also moonlighted in their emergency room. And that was a time that I was there for 5 years. And every third night for 5 years, I pulled a 12-hour shift in the local emergency room. So I'd be in the Army for 12 hours, then I'd be in the emergency room for 12 hours. So 5 years worth of 12-hour shifts, you get exposed to a lot of stuff. So that allowed me to branch out and do a lot more when I was in Afghanistan.
That's what made things get done. You made the best use of the resources you had available and that you had to bring to bear to the situation you were confronted with. The interesting thing about our group is that we were senior to most of the folks there. And our general surgeon dubbed us the AARP platoon. So long and the short of it is that, just as an example, the radiologist was a West Point graduate, sharp as a tack, really good, 67 years old. But he worked just as hard as anybody, and so we earned our stripes as the AARP platoon though.
One thing to bring out, I don't know if you see if this sunset, but the sunsets were spectacular. I've got a whole thing on that page there of sunsets. It's just amazing. But this is the
Lots of folks
this
wonder
is the Groundhog Day we talked about.
what it's like specifically at the hospital and what normal activity is. Well, the answer to that question is there is no such thing as normal activity. What basically happened is you're on call 24/7. You don't know when the next situation is going to arise that needs your help. So you're constantly anticipating the next event. And what I found myself doing was I was kind of within close proximity to the radiologist, whose beeper seemed to go off more than anyone else's. And when his pager went off, I went with him because I knew that if they needed him, they were going to need me. And so that just went on day after day after day. There was no distinction between one day or another. There's no distinction between nighttime or daytime. And there was no distinction of when sleep time is. Sleep time was whenever you could grab a few minutes here or there, and you kind of had one eye asleep and one eye open. And you were constantly in a situation where you could at any moment be involved. And that happened all the time. So one day after another blended together into one giant experience as opposed to individual days. I don't remember even thinking in terms of days. It just didn't happen.
Okay, I know you've put up with a lot so far, but the next few are really the critical ones. We're going to be talking about interpreters here in a minute. And the thing that's important is that Afghanistan is not like the United States where there's 50 states, but you pretty much speak the same language and you pretty much have a lot of things in common. Afghanistan's not that way. There are 12 different tribes, they each speak their own language. It's really hard to assimilate them into anything cohesive. So we depended on the interpreters all the time. I told you on the map that Bagram and Kabul were a short bus ride away from each other. So most of the interpreters lived in Kabul, and they were bussed into Bagram every day and bussed back. And one day, this happened. Oh, before I forget, this guy right here, I want you to look at his face and memorize it, because it comes up later.
Particular situation involved the very first day our group arrived. One of the most important things that we had to deal with the Afghani nationals is the language barrier. Nobody that I knew from the American forces could speak their languages, so we depended tremendously on the use of interpreters. And so we worked with them day in, day out, all day, every day, and they became, more than members of the team. They were, buddies and family. Of interest is the fact that many of these interpreters were very educated people from Afghanistan. As a matter of fact, most of the interpreters were actually, at least in the hospital community, were actually medical doctors themselves in Afghanistan. Most of them lived in Kabul, which is a bus ride away from the Bagram airfield. And so every day they would be bussed in and then bussed back. The day we arrived, we were kind of unloading and unpacking and doing the kinds of routine things that you do prior to actually assuming your job. The Army is sort of famous for standing on ceremony, and so the situation was that the people that were being relieved and the people that were coming in to relieve them, there would have to be a sort of a change of command ceremony, and that hadn't happened yet. And so on their way in this particular morning, the bus right very close to the gates of Bagram airfield was hit by an IED, and the bus was severely damaged and rolled over. The bus driver was killed, and there were 44 other casualties. And so in a blink of an eye, there were 44 casualties arriving at the hospital emergency area, and it was overwhelming all of the outgoing cadre there. So here we were, the new guys, not yet signed in, not yet had the change of command. To be honest about it, we looked at them, they looked at us, and the heck with the niceties of a change of command, we all jumped in together. And the wounds were so diverse that everybody just did what they could. I worked on one particular severely injured individual with a oral surgeon who basically was sewing this one interpreter's ear back on, and I was working on putting his scalp back together. He was basically had a fully exposed cranium, and so long story short, everybody was doing everything that they could do, and it didn't matter what their actual designated specialty was. Later on, when I left, when our group left, I often wondered what happened to the interpreters we left behind, and wondered about that many, many times. I just happened to notice when a magazine came from one of the military-affiliated organizations, there was a picture on the cover that caught my attention. And the lead story was how this individual finally made it out of Afghanistan and got him and his family to the United States. And that was the gentleman that I had worked on.
Okay, so that was the face I wanted you to memorize. So he did get out, but there's a lot of unaccounted for folks. Now, what you just saw there was the sanitized version of what happened. I want to show you the real version here in a second, and I just want to add one thing that doesn't come up in the video, and that is that there were 44 casualties from that bus ride that survived to get to the emergency room. Very serious injuries, as you'll see. Every one of them was saved. So it's a tribute to what you can do when you work together. Here's some of the other film from let's see. '48. Okay, I'm not going to dwell on these. They're sort of self-evident what they are, but this is kind of what we were dealing with that day. This is the one that I was working on when I put that together. That's the after picture. Not bad for a dental surgeon putting the ear on, I think. And the guy on the left, this guy is the guy that we worked on him too, but he's the guy that got out and was featured in that magazine. And this is the guy that had the head that was worked on him.
Bill, we usually go about an hour. We're a little over an hour now, so we're going to have questions and answers, and then people want to hear the rest of the talk. You can stay later, and he will finish the rest of his talk. How much more you got there, Bill? About 20 more minutes?
I probably have less than that, but I have one I really want everybody to see.
All right, you show one more, and then we'll have question and answer.
Okay.
One day, part of my normal routine was to circulate through the hospital, the medical wards, the surgical wards, the ICU, the emergency room. I was in the emergency room treating a patient in one of the side rooms when I heard a commotion in the main part of the emergency room. I left that patient for a moment just to see if this new patient that was being admitted is somebody that I would need to deal with. and I took a quick look and saw that he had some facial injuries and something near the eye, so I knew I would be called, but I knew it wasn't an emergency for right then and there. So I went back to the other room to finish treating the other patient. Then I heard another commotion and then a large explosion. I ran back into the room, and it turns out that the patient that I had just looked at, he had lots of upper extremity injuries, and he was not able to successfully detonate a bomb that he had on him, and one of our corpsmen wrenched it from him and turned around and cradled it, and he got blown away and killed by that bomb. The other corpsman that was nearby wound up with a severe eye injury from this, and it turns out that as the day evolved, both the corpsman with the eye injury and the patient, who turned out to be a 17-year-old insurgent, they were both patients of mine later on that evening as I was putting the finishing touches on their eye injuries.
Now, what I want to show you is very important to me. It's the reason why I'm here today, to be able to talk to you. So bear with me on this. This is the second corpsman, the one that got the eye injury. So you can see that he's there after we fixed him up, and he's got his Purple Heart. But let me show you what really happened to him.
Oh, God.
That. So that's what I worked on most of the night, trying to fix that up. But now I'm going to show you the injuries from the 17-year-old Taliban insurgent . Okay, there he is, and you can see that he had some facial issues, which were no big deal. He had some particles in his right eye, so I dealt with those, but that's not obvious on this. But these were the extremity issues that he had that made it so he couldn't successfully or in a timely manner detonate the bomb. His upper extremities. There's me fixing his eye, but he's missing a digit there, and that one's half off. You don't get to see the tendon very well like that most of the time. So then what I consider the most important slides are right now. Okay, this is the chapel that's on Camp Lacey, and there's the memorial service. Specialist Crane is the guy that took the bomb and cradled it and got killed. He saved pretty much everyone else in the emergency room, including me. I was only from here to that wall away.
Okay, Bill.
Okay, that's all I need to do. I have a few little other things that I could do, but we'll defer to Mark here.
Okay, excellent. Okay, thank you very much, Bill. This is called Lunch, Learn, and Share. This is a share time, so we will send microphones out to the audience for questions and answers. It'll be a short period of time, but you stand up or raise your hand, and we'll have a microphone come to you. You stand up, say your name, face Bill, and he will answer your question. I have a first question for Bill. Afghanistan war, longer than any war we've ever had. 2001 to 2021, and now everything's reversed and the Taliban's taken over as soon as we pulled out of there. A lot of American aid's going to there, but if you look at the country of Afghanistan, it's really 4 countries divided by mountains, and it divides the cultures and the people. How much did you see a difference in the culture where you were compared to other areas that were separated by mountain ranges in regards to religion, cultures, and how could they ever join each other?
One of the slide groups that I didn't get to show demonstrates pretty well. I did point out the fact that there were mountains around. What the air base is, Bagram Airfield, is in a place that is designated as a high mountain desert. What does that mean? That means there's pretty much nothing there. It's flat, but it's surrounded by very, very, very high mountains. So that isolated it a bit. And I didn't really get out very much from that area. I did get to Kabul a couple of times. I showed you that one school we opened up. That was in Kabul. I made myself available to do some things like that just to get outside the wire, if you will. But the long and the short of it is, I didn't interface with too many of the nationals that weren't part of that general area. So they all seem pretty much the same. I did get to see a lot of the people, and the reason is because we were supposed to deal with the American forces as primary, but then any Allied forces that were injured, they were secondary. The third echelon of care was for the Afghan nationals. However, the Afghan nationals overpopulated everybody else, so the more encounters with Afghan nationals happened than with anything else. And those encounters were mostly with people encountering blasts or landmines or fires. Those are two I skipped over, but we saw mostly Afghani nationals and mostly children. Do I have a moment to tell one little story on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. One of them I skipped over has to do with why we saw so many children with blast injuries. Well, the Russians owned all that territory back in the day. When they left behind a legacy. They have landmines and explosive devices everywhere. So here these Afghani people are trying to make a living scratching out some kind of agricultural products from this very poor territory, very, very poor land. So they would have, you notice that there was some donkeys, there was some oxen, and there were camels and other, fairly big, strong animals. If your family had one of those, that's what you used to cultivate the property, the land. However, you always had a child, leading that animal. And you led that animal through the territory because it was riddled with landmines, and more than likely, the child is going to trip the landmine and get injured. And you say, why would you let your child do that? Well, the simple economics were that they knew, in a very perverted kind of way, they knew that if they lost a child, they could replace it. They couldn't replace the animal. The whole family went down if the animal went down. So I don't know that I interface with any of the other cultural issues other than their difficulty in making a living. What I will say is very happy people. I mean, it's amazing all the hardships they have, and yet they were upbeat all the time.
Norman, who's in the back? Get a microphone, please.
Yeah.
Name?
This is Don Johnson. Not a question, but a comment. Recently, on a trip to D.C., had the opportunity to call Uber driver. This Uber driver was an Afghanistan interpreter, and he's one of the few that the United States did the right thing with and brought him and his family back. So that's a good end.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Bill, correct us on this. I think Vietnam, we lost 58,000 soldiers. They're there 20 years. If you stretch the numbers in Afghanistan, I think 2,500 deaths. Is that about right during our 20-year war there?
I'm not sure. I left in 2005, and that war kept going. So I don't know what the final totals were. The amount of casualties were nowhere near the Vietnam conflict, but the types of casualties were pretty considerable, as you could see from the videos.
Any other questions in the crowd? But he's talking about improvisation. You go to war, you talk to a staff sergeant or a sergeant, he's going to say, I'll take one farmer over 40 city boys. Because a city boy will get a radio and it won't work, and he'll just say, let's get a new one. A farmer has to fix things all the time. And so what Bill talked about is improvisation. Everything's improvised when you go to war. Chaos, chaos, and chaos. And the veterans in the place know that, but Bill's sacrificed his possible loss of life or loss of limb with these 39 years. And we have a lot of other veterans do that. And that's the cost of our freedom. And so we have freedom because of people like Bill and like a lot of you out here. So we're thankful for your time.
Thank you. One last thing, those papers that were handed out, those are things that if you look at them and you think that's something that you actually want to see, seek me out privately, or I'll stay here if you want. But the other thing is if you invite me back, maybe we'll have a better audiovisual experience.
Thanks for coming. See you in 2 weeks. David Carr, same place.